Everyone hear me okay? Yep, so just some quick introductions. I'm Ian, I'm the sales manager at Eventsforce. I've been in the events and event tech industry for about 13 years, and I've been at Eventsforce for about half of that time. If you don't know Eventsforce, we're an event technology company. We're based just up the road in Old Street. We've been in the business about 13 years. And pleased to have Caroline and Carla with us for this session this afternoon. So just before we start, if I can ask them just to introduce themselves for 30, 60 seconds, who you are and what you do.
I'm Caroline Hill, so I'm Head of Digital Global Delivery at the British Council. So one of the things I look after is our Eventsforce system, which is used by staff in about 100 countries around the world.
Hi everyone, I'm Carla. I am from Haymarket Media Group. My responsibility is event operations and customer services, client services. So that includes our registration system, which is Eventsforce.
Great, thanks. So we're going to have a bit of a chat with Caroline and Carla about personalisation, about how important personalisation is for their events and the steps they're taking around that. Before we start, I just wanted to run a little quick poll for you guys, just to get your thoughts. Is personalisation worth the time and effort? Anyone? Okay, so at least one yes. So look, hold that thought and we'll revisit that question at the end. So what we've done at Eventsforce, we undertook a research study around the topic of personalisation, looking at the current trends, and we spoke to over 150 senior event planners. So the first question we asked was, how important is event personalisation? Our research showed that it was a top priority for 73% of event planners, and that 96% of event planners are using event personalisation at some level. But maybe importantly, 51% would like to do more. So my first question really is, how important is personalisation for your events and the types of events that you run, and what steps do you take to implement personalisation for your events?
Hi everyone, I'll start. I think basic personalisation is expected now. If you are an avid online shopper like myself, you will expect the same kind of level of personalisation as something like Amazon. So for our events, we do various types. So some are free to attend, some are paid for. All have personalised invitation links for those people that attend free of charge. We also shape and tailor the programme to people by taking information from them on registration. So that part of personalisation and the event experience, that's how we shape the programme. So we'll look at who's coming. We'll also use that to brief our speakers to make sure they're tailoring their content to those people in the room. I think at Haymarket as well, we have a single customer view aim. So we've spent quite a lot of money in recent years on a customer marketing database, with the aim that we look at our customers across the business, regardless of what products they're buying from us. So whether that be events, a subscription, an awards entry. And for us as well in live events, we're looking more and more at how we personalise the on-site experience. It's not something we do much of at the moment. All of our personalisation is around registration and content. So for us it is important, we just need to do more of it.
The sorts of events that we run international conferences for thousands of people down to tiny workshops for 20 people. We run them in about 100 countries around the world, so multilingual is really important for us, personalisation-wise. We have our websites, our registration forms, and all our email comms are in various different languages according to the market that the event's aimed at. We can use up to 61 languages on the platform at the moment. For big conferences, we'll have a range of attendee categories, and we personalise the registration journey for each of those types of attendee categories. We use Meeting Manager, which allows attendees to network with each other, book meetings. And we also use an event app for big conferences, which allows people to see their personal agenda with sessions they're attending, meetings that they've booked, and after the event they can get sent materials from the sessions that they've attended. So we use personalisation in quite a lot of different ways.
And would it be fair to say that quite different objectives really? So for Haymarket, you're trying to build up a picture of that attendee from a commercial sales perspective. But for you guys at the British Council, it's really about the content delivery, taking into account the audience and the country that you're working in. So two very different key reasons for actually all the importance of personalisation, really. As Carla said, maybe basic kind of personalisations may be expected these days, and our survey suggested that invitations and personalised communications is one of the top ways that event planners are personalising events. And some of the other things the guys mentioned there, on-site experiences, scheduling and networking, push notifications, personalisation through apps, etc. So lots of good things out there, and it sounds like you guys are doing quite a lot of good things around your events. I'm sure it's not as easy as all that. So what are the key challenges that you guys find when it comes to personalisation? And just a few thoughts from our survey. The top 5 challenges of personalisation, perhaps not surprisingly, the top one that came up was the lack of time and resources. Everyone's busy, everyone's running from event to event, and actually the time to plan and implement personalisation properly is perhaps a challenge. But then maybe more interestingly, thinking about the data side of things, actually deciding on the data to collect and getting that balance right between the actual value that we're providing to the attendees and protecting attendee privacy is something that's more and more important. So for you guys, what are the main challenges that you face when you're trying to put all this together?
One of the biggest challenges that we face is what data we should actually be collecting. Because we work in so many countries, data protection laws in a lot of those countries, so some countries in the Middle East and Africa are a good example, their data protection laws are nothing like the UK's. So we have to train staff in those countries to think at the standard of the UK rather than the country that they live in and the data protection laws that they're used to. We have, in quite a lot of those places, we've got small operations, so the person building and running events, that might be only a small portion of their job and it's not their area of expertise. So there's a lot of training required around that. And we also need to educate them about what questions to ask. Quite a lot of them want to ask loads of stuff just in case they need it, and actually you should only be asking the questions that you need the answers for in order to register people. Because we had one example, we were asking people for passport numbers and we weren't doing anything with that data, but it was just because they were coming from overseas, and we don't need to ask that, and we're asking for sensitive data that we don't need to store. The other challenge is we find it quite difficult to measure. How do you measure personalisation? It's something that's pretty tricky. We use event apps very sparingly because they're very expensive and it's very difficult to measure, so we only use them for big conferences. Ways in which we do measure, we use analytics, so we look at, particularly with registration flows, we look for drop-off points to see where people are dropping out of the journey. For one of our big conferences, we actually sent one of our UX team down to the conference with a big tub of chocolate to ask people what they thought of the registration flow, and the feedback we got from that was really useful, and made quite a lot of changes to the registration flow for the event the following year to make it easier for people to finish.
I just kind of want to touch on measurement and ROI. My biggest challenge in trying to convince the powers that be that we need to spend more money on site personalisation is that things like apps with push notifications and personalised agendas, they cost a lot of money to have a decent one anyway. And what we've found is that we don't actually get a lot of engagement. Now that might be something to do with the type of delegates we have. We work in a number of industries. We work across the Marcom sector. We also work in wind energy, planning, which aren't as sexy. And so potentially the measurement that we're doing is looking at that across the board, and therefore perhaps one group isn't as au fait with the technology. But yeah, I think the biggest challenge is measuring that, and how do you justify spending thousands of pounds on on-site experience stuff when no one's engaging with it.
So can you measure it at all? Do you guys do anything to try and measure that return on investment?
We've done it in the past where we've got, you get a percentage of people that have downloaded the app, so 54%. I think the highest we've ever got is about 59%, and that may have something to do with the amount of integration that we were able to do. But generally speaking, people want to refer to a program and they want to refer to a floor plan. My personal opinion is that unless you can fully integrate it with your registration system, which is not something we've been able to do before for various reasons, I personally don't think they're worth it unless you've got a huge event like this. I mean, obviously the app for your conferences, Caroline, will be super useful because they're large. The type of size of our events that we're running, we're talking anywhere from kind of 50 right up to 250, so they're not massive, and I think that might have something to do with it.
So I know we've discussed previously that you've in a way scaled back on some of those tools because it's hard for you to measure that return. And I guess when we talk about the return on investment of personalisation, it all really comes down to data, and actually the data you're collecting from attendees and actually the tracking that maybe you're doing on site to decide if it's really a worthwhile activity. So, of course, there's many different ways that you can collect data. What tools are the best for collecting data for personalisation or data from attendees in general? So registration systems and online forms, most people do that around their events, whatever type of events you're running. You have some kind of online booking site or online data capture form, and it's often the first place that you engage with your potential attendee, the first point that you have the opportunity to get data from them. So that's obviously a crucial first step in personalising the event experience. Lots of event planners, maybe unsurprisingly, are relying on their CRM or marketing system or some kind of central database to get that data. On the previous slide there, we had one of the challenges was inaccurate data, and of course, you know, the data is only as good as as accurate as it is really in a CRM system, for example. We see quite a lot with clients that we work with when we're discussing how we can help them share information from their event system with their CRM system. The first step really is actually understanding what data they have. Is it accurate? Are there lots of duplicate records? And these are all very common things. Thinking more about the on-site experience, obviously we have surveys, event apps, and social media as well. So there's lots of different ways that, different tools you can use to collect information for personalisation. I guess the question is really, how do you utilise those tools, and how do you decide how much information you're going to collect and how much is too much? Where's the boundary with all of this?
Well, we've just done a big piece of work on this, and traditionally I think there are two sides to the story. One is free to attend events and one is paid for. And I think the feeling was, certainly with us in the events that we were running, if they were free to attend, then we could ask them everything and it could all be mandatory because it was a free place. But actually, if you think about it, you need to put yourself in the place of an attendee. We're all event professionals, we're all here today, we've all registered to come. And you have to work through those questions. And as Caroline was saying before, do you need to ask them their passport number? Do you need to know how long they've been in that current role? Do you need to know all of the information that you're asking? And what we found was actually we didn't need as much as we thought to qualify them for the free-to-attend events. And we saw an uplift on people completing registrations. We saw an uplift on booking experience, quality scoring.
So actually by collecting less data, you've improved the booking experience but still have the data that you need. You're still collecting the useful data.
It took a while. I mean, it took a lot of convincing for the respective marketing teams to kind of get on board with it. But actually, as someone that goes to events where you have to go through quite a lengthy registration process, my input was very much like, you're just going to get crap data. People are going to put a dash in or a star, or they're just going to tab through that registration form. And actually what's important to us, going back to our single customer view, is that we have good quality data. And if we're asking lots and lots of questions, people are just going to get bored halfway through.
So maybe it sounds quite straightforward, but one of the key things here really is then to do what Haymarket have done over the last year or so, and perhaps sit down and just plan out the basic questions that you're asking through your event booking site. What questions do you really need to ask? And I guess also for the size of a number of events that you run, to make sure you ask the questions consistently across all of your events so you can actually use them in a useful manner. Yeah,
I mean, that's a piece of work we did a few years ago with Eventsforce, where we started a brand new license, and that was to coincide with the creation of the customer marketing database. Eventsforce was mapped into that, and we were asking the same questions in the same way. So, for example, on a PR Week event, we would ask them XYZ question. If they were a subscriber to PR Week, we would ask them the same questions, so that we were pulling the same data, we could use it in the same way across the board.
Okay, how do you guys see it, Caroline? What steps do you take when you're planning out the data you're going to capture?
Well, because we run so many events and they're so different, we don't have standard question sets that we ask, which is a challenge. So again, only ask the questions that you need the answers to register. But the other key thing is, how are you asking that question? So for instance, one of the events we were looking at, they were asking for date of birth, and actually we established that all they actually wanted to know was the attendee between 18 and 35. So it's like, ask what you actually want to know, because actually if you're asking if they're 18 to 35, they just have to tick a box and say yes or no. The data you're collecting isn't as sensitive, so it decreases your risk level around data protection as well, and people are more comfortable parting with that information, because you're not asking them for anything that anybody can really use if they get hold of that information. If you want to ask additional questions to help you personalise stuff in the future, if you don't need to know it, make them optional, because then people don't have to answer it if they don't want to. And also for us, again, it's really important internally training our staff, making them aware of what they can and can't do, what the regulations are. We have data protection officers in every region that before we publish an event, they check all the privacy notices and the consent questions to make sure that legally they're correct, so that we're covered as a business. And we do try and audit the events. We can't audit everything because we have so many, but we try and do spot checks. But we are working to try and improve our processes, because we still collect too much data, because we can't audit every event that we run.
So certainly a focus on only collecting the data that you need. I think that's quite clear, and we'll talk a little bit about data protection at the end in a second. But just thinking about some of the other tools, we've talked a bit about personalisation there from the sort of event registration side. Obviously there's lots of on-site tools that people use to collect data and engage with their attendees. How effective is that for you guys in terms of personalisation and actually understanding more about your attendees?
I think, again, we used to, years gone by, we'd hand out a paper evaluation form. We'd ask about booking experience, we'd ask about the venue, we'd ask about each of the speakers. And there was a lot of questions on that form, and we didn't get a very good response rate. Again, we've looked at it and kind of asked, it has to go back to why. Why are you asking the question in the first place? Do you need to ask the question, and is it going to be useful to you? So yes, we needed to know whether the booking process was pleasant for them. We needed to know whether they liked the speakers, but actually condensing that information down. We've moved into electronic surveys in some markets. As I mentioned before, some of the guys don't like a survey gizmo, so they still stick to a paper form. But it is tailoring it to your audience and how are you getting the best responses. So the Win guys like a paper form. The PR Week guys like to go online and fill it out afterwards. We've done a little bit of what Caroline was doing, so on-site surveys with a member of the team literally going and asking the question, how did you find the venue today? What other venues do you like? And it's that face-to-face interaction and feedback which gets a really good response for us. We use Slido as well, so we ask polls in the middle of presentations when people are still milling around in the room. What did you think of the venue? What other venues have you used? How's the temperature? All the important stuff.
Okay, so certainly lots of things that you can be doing, and also some things to consider when you're planning this out. I guess now we need to add another layer onto that regarding GDPR, which I'm sure you've all heard about, and there's been lots of discussion today about. We're not sitting here as experts in GDPR by any means, but of course now, Caroline, you mentioned a couple of times there about data protection and having a data protection officer. What things are you considering now regarding GDPR and particularly the data you're collecting, and how's this going to impact things in terms of personalisation for events moving forward?
So our focus at the moment is all about compliance, making sure that we're compliant with GDPR, making sure our privacy notices are correct, making sure that we're asking the correct consents, making sure that all our marketing clauses are opt-in instead of opt-out, all that sort of thing. Making sure that we have some kind of continual training program for our staff, because we've got staff, we've probably got about 70 event managers around the world, and obviously so we've got quite a turnover of people leaving, new people arriving, so we have to have training tools available all the time to train new people. Our priority is always going to be, at the moment, compliance to avoid the fines, because they are so huge. And I think personalisation, at least in the first year or so, will probably take a hit while we make sure we get that right.
And from Haymarket's perspective, Carla, I know we've discussed a few interesting things before regarding consent and opt-in. If you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much everyone knows about GDPR. We are very fortunate enough to have a very knowledgeable data protection officer who has told us the ICO's statement on events. So by the letter of the law, and the example she gave to us was that if Carla and I booked onto our event on a Monday, and then Ian and you two booked onto our event on a Tuesday, we would have to retrospectively get permission to share your details with each other. So even on a very basic sharing a delegate list with other delegates, and that's the same with sponsors as well, so sharing delegate details with sponsors, and that's free to attend events, paid for events, doesn't make any difference. We expect, I believe there's going to be another statement issued by the ICO in springtime about that. In the meantime, we are just changing our statements now, so getting GDPR ready, changing our changing our opt-outs to opt-ins, asking the question, do you want your information to be included on the delegate list to be shared with other people? So we're just kind of getting ready now.
So even thinking about basic personalisation, things like when I get on site at the event, I may have pre-booked some sessions, I might expect a personalised agenda that I might download through an app, I might expect to be able to network with other attendees. I guess you need to have all the right opt-in for all of these different things now.
Yeah, I think the way our DPO has explained it to me personally is that you just have to be explicit in why you're asking the question. So a lot of our mandatory questions now become non-mandatory. You have to think, it's back to the why again. Why are we asking those questions, and are they necessary for this person to register?
Okay, so certainly, again, quite a lot to think about around GDPR if you are thinking about the personalisation and the experiences for your attendees. Our research suggested that 36% of event planners think GDPR will limit personalisation. I personally think it's going to impact all events at all levels in some way. 49% maybe didn't know or weren't sure. Now's probably the time to be working on that. Of course, we could talk about this in quite a lot of depth. We've just kind of skimmed the surface at the moment. Just think about a couple of takeaways and some considerations around this. I think we all agree that you need to decide on what personalisation data you need to collect and why before you start. So make sure you don't ask unnecessarily questions. Perhaps limit mandatory questions to make sure you only get the data that you really need. That will also enhance the booking experience and ensure that you get the delegate numbers that you're looking for. And show attendees why you're collecting the data and how it's going to bring value to them and their experiences, and be very clear on how you're going to use that information and what it will mean to them. And of course, don't forget GDPR. We've got about 10 minutes for some questions. Regarding GDPR in general, we at Eventsforce have done some research around that area and have recently published an ebook and bringing it all together really and looking at the impact on what it's going to impact on data collection and personalisation and all those things. So you can download that from our website or visit us at the stand. But yeah, I'll hand over to any questions. So the second question there, do you personalise event invitations or event websites for different attendee categories?
Yes, is the short answer. We have an annual event called Media 360. Last year we ended up having 3 separate events on Eventsforce. One was for free of charge people, so VIPs that had a free place. One was for paid for, and one was for sponsorship guests. And what we've managed to do this year with the help of Ian and his team is to put that all together. But essentially what we do is send out a personalised invitation email with a link to the VIPs. We send out a normal registration link to the registration website to the payers, and we send a registration link to the sponsorship guests, and they're all personalised, so they're all, dear Carla, please click here to complete your registration, blah blah blah.
And as well as just the personalisation on the event registration experience, do you do anything to actually personalise website content?
I can't speak for our brand sites because I'm not a marketing expert, I'm pure ops, and so from what I understand it to be, all of our event websites are now housed within the brand sites. So there will be an element of personalisation, i.e. we have subscribers and non-subscribers, and that's how our customers are categorised. So they either subscribe behind the paywall or they don't. If they don't, they can get a limited amount of content. If they do, then they have free access. So certain parts of our websites will be tailored, but not the event websites
based on the picture
themselves.
you built up about that visitor.
Yeah, exactly. So based on the picture we have of that customer, so back to our single customer view, is, from what I understand it, yeah. So the content will be tailored for that person based on what they've visited around the site. But that's our brand websites rather than our event websites.
And Caroline, what is the least effective data collection tool or channel you've ever tried?
So we've been using Eventsforce for 5 years? Before we started using Eventsforce, we did not have a corporate solution for event registration. So local teams were all using different solutions. I've seen them using Excel spreadsheets, Google Docs, SurveyMonkey, various kind of form programs like FormStack or Confirm It, and then trying to kind of shoehorn all that information into one place, and it was a nightmare. Now we use Eventsforce, so everybody's using the same system, so all our data sits in the same database, so we can run reports globally, regionally, by country, by business unit, so we can look at all our exams events or all our English events. We can put all that information into our CRM system, so, you know, using one central tool that everybody uses that's actually designed to do the thing that you need it to do is really useful. And the other thing to say about Google Docs and Excel and all that kind of stuff is they are not very secure. Whereas obviously Eventsforce, we pen test it every year. These guys fix any issues that get flagged. So Eventsforce, we can categorically say to the business, this is a secure platform where you can collect all this data and the data is safe.
So I guess at a very basic level, thinking just back to sum things up around personalisation, just two things there really. One, obviously, as we've said, think about the data you're collecting and make sure you plan that out. And secondly, just consistency. The British Council have obviously moved forward quite a long way from 5 years ago, where perhaps you had data in different places, different systems. Bringing everything into one system and collecting data in a consistent way is a good place to start if you're not doing that already. Hopefully it's touched on a few interesting areas. As I say, that's just a sort of touch point on some of the research we've been doing as well, so there's more detail available. I thought we'd just finish by asking the same question again. We can just finish with the poll. So, based on a couple of things we've discussed and some of the challenges, is personalisation worth the time and effort? The same person still thinks so that's good. Okay, so I think that's everything from us. We're happy to hang around if you've got any other questions, but thank you for coming to this session. Thanks very much.